a stricken dad.
Sounds like a brilliant show. Well, thanks to my brilliant panel tonight, Reem Ibrahim, Andrew Eborn and Louis Schaefer, and I'll see you again next week. And don't forget, headliners as well tonight at 11 p.m.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, good evening. I'm Jonathan Vautry here with your GB News weather forecast provided by the Met Office. Have quite a foggy and murky night to come ahead of us leading into Sunday. Certainly could see some mist and fog patches forming relatively widely across areas of the UK. Quite a damp night as well, with showers pushing across the southwest. This band of longer rain moving into eastern England and eastern Scotland as well. Could be some localised disruption with this rainfall falling on already very saturated ground. Temperatures though underneath all that cloud generally holding up above freezing, but we can't rule out a patchy frost for some clearer spells across areas of Scotland. But it will be quite a damp start to Sunday again, with those showers pushing their way through. Could be quite heavy, maybe with some thunder along some coastal areas of the far south. Rain eventually clearing for eastern England, but it is going to be a very wet day for north-eastern areas of Scotland. But some brighter spells developing as we head into the afternoon too, though, with some continuing showers moving in from the west. Temperatures generally around 7 to 11 degrees Celsius. On Monday, the area of low pressure that we have seen around this weekend will slowly drift its way northwards, a bit closer towards Iceland. That allows this northwesterly flow of air to start moving its way in. Quite a lot of isobars on the chart there, so it will be a relatively breezy day for most of us. Those showers will be most frequent in the north and west, particularly further parts of Northern Ireland, western Scotland, but areas further towards the east, starting off with a decent amount of sunshine, a bit of fair weather cloud bubbling up into the afternoon. Can't rule out the odd shower, but certainly drier here nonetheless. We hold on to a fairly changeable theme throughout next week, so further showers and longer spells of rain certainly on the cards for many. Bye-bye.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
The Camilla Tominey Show, Sunday mornings from 9:30.
We had Grant Shapps on last week. He was talking about how defence spending is now creeping up to 2.25% of GDP. Ben Wallace's predecessor suggested it should be 3%. We hear that we've got the smallest army, I think, since the Napoleonic Wars. Numbers are down. There's a question as to whether we can staff frigates in the Red Sea. Why haven't we sent aircraft carriers? What's your impression of the situation?
Well, I don't think it matters how much you spend, it's how effectively you spend it. And we spend it very ineffectively. We have lots of scandals about defence spending. And I think partly because of the monopoly position of some of our defence suppliers, we don't get good value and we don't get reliability. This latest story in the Telegraph is that HMS Diamond, which is our ship, which is out there defending the Red Sea, doesn't have the capability of firing a missile from the ship to the land, so it can't participate in the attacks on the Houthis. So in order that we can participate in the attacks, we're flying RAF aircraft from Cyprus, which is a very long way away. When I was Defence Secretary, I ordered cruise missiles for our nuclear-powered, but not nuclear-armed submarines. And I think we have 6 or possibly 7 of those. But last autumn, it was reported that 5 of those were out of commission, were not available. We have about 21 aggressive surface ships. So we've got 2 aircraft carriers, then we've got frigates, and we've got destroyers. But at any one time, you can count on about half of those not being available because they're under refit or whatever. So we have a minimal surface fleet now. And for whatever reason, it doesn't seem that we're able to deploy a submarine to the area that can fire cruise missiles. Our 2 aircraft carriers, built at enormous expense, are sitting in Portsmouth.
Which seems to most people ludicrous, at least with what's going on.
It doesn't seem ludicrous to me.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there, with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's 9 o'clock on television, on radio and online. In the United Kingdom and across the world, this is Mark Dolan Tonight. In my big opinion, the community jogging group Parkrun have been caught up in a trans row with women's runners no longer having their times published on the organisation's website. Sorry, folks, but you can't outrun biological reality. This war on real women has got to end. My Mark Meets guest helped overturn the wrongful conviction of Stephen Downing, who spent 27 years in prison for the murder of Wendy Sewell, a crime he did not commit. Campaigning journalist Don Hale also helped alleged Jill Dando killer Barry George walk free from jail. After proving his innocence, this heroic and brave man tells his incredible story shortly. In the big story, as his tax return reveals that he made over £2 million last year, is Rishi Sunak too rich to be Prime Minister? And should the UK taxpayer be funding the redevelopment of Manchester United's stadium Old Trafford? I'll be asking TV News stalwart and Man United superfan Michael Crick. Looking forward to this in my take at 10. Prince Harry spends just half an hour with his cancer-stricken dad and no meeting with his brother. He might be rich after the books and TV shows, but the young prince has paid the ultimate price. Yes, I'll be dealing with Prince Harry in no uncertain terms at 10 o'clock. 2 hours of big opinion, a big debate and lots of entertainment. This is your perfect Saturday night in. Shall we have some fun? Why don't you crack open a beer? Maybe uncork a bottle of Pinot Grigio? Or, if you rather, fire up the kettle, tear open the custard creams, whatever you fancy tonight. Let's have some fun, let's have a debate and let's have diverse opinion. Lots to get through, but first, the news headlines and Sam Francis.
Mark, thank you very much and good evening from the GB newsroom. Just after 9 o'clock, our top story tonight, as we've been reporting, GB News has learned today that 15 migrants have been rescued after crossing the English Channel in a stolen French fishing boat. The small vessel left the French coast this morning between Calais and Dunkirk. The boat was handed over to UK Border Force officials and the migrants were then brought to Dover. That means that so far this year, almost 1,400 migrants have made the journey successfully across the English Channel in small boats. Police are continuing their search of the River Thames in central London for the body of chemical attack suspect Abdul Azidi. Earlier, a police boat was seen moving between Vauxhall and Chelsea bridges, with the Metropolitan Police saying that they began that search this morning just after low tide. That was around 9 o'clock this morning. The 35-year-old was last seen on CCTV leaning over the railings of Chelsea Bridge. For those watching on TV, you can see there the figure of Abdul Azidi on the left-hand side of your screen, just crossing that bridge. That was before 11:30 p.m. on the night of that attack in South London. Detectives now believe that Azidi has died, and they say that his body may never be found. A woman has today been charged with attempted murder after the suspected poisoning of two children, one aged 9 and one aged 13. Emergency services responded to the scene in East Sussex on Thursday evening after receiving calls of welfare concerns. All three, we understand, were later taken to hospital for treatment in the area. Appearing in court earlier, the 38-year-old woman was remanded in custody and she'll appear again in court on the 8th of March. Authorities, though, have said that it was an isolated incident and they don't believe there's any further risk to the public. Pro-Palestine protesters have been removed from a Barclays bank branch on Birmingham High Street today after staging a sit-in. 7 people you can see here lying down inside that bank branch with Palestinian flags and placards reading "Stop the Genocide in Gaza." It's been reported that one man who was angered by those protests was seen banging on the glass doors of the bank building. We understand, though, that no arrests were made. Well, meanwhile, Lord David Cameron has said today that he is deeply concerned about a planned Israeli ground invasion on the southern Gazan city of Rafah. It follows an airstrike earlier today that killed 3 people in a car. You can see, if you're watching on TV, the images of the aftermath of that attack. The Palestinians are claiming it was carried out by the Israeli military. Medics also say a separate strike by Israel overnight killed 17 other people in the same area. The strike comes after Israel's Prime Minister has announced a plan to evacuate civilians from the crowded area of Rafah, and he says to defeat the last Hamas fighters there. The US, though, has said that it won't be supporting any further military action without the guarantee, it says, of protection for civilians. Back here in the UK, large parts of England are facing potential travel disruption and possible flooding as heavy rain hits. The Met Office has issued a yellow weather warning for rain, covering Newcastle and surrounding areas, all the way down to East Anglia and along England's east coast. That came into force at 7 o'clock this evening, so 2 hours into that yellow weather warning so far. It will last until 12 p.m. tomorrow. There's also another yellow weather warning covering much of Cornwall and parts of Devon and Somerset. That started even earlier at 6 o'clock this evening. The latest round of doctor strikes that were planned for later this month could be called off, we understand. That's according to the British Medical Association. They say that's because they're asking for NHS bosses to give them more time for negotiations. The latest wave of walkouts were announced this week after the BMA said the government had failed to improve its pay offer. They're asking for a 35% pay rise, but that, though, has been rejected by the government. Under the current plans, thousands of medics will strike in England for 5 days from the 24th to the 28th of February. And a story that we've been following in the last few hours here in the newsroom. A pilot has been airlifted to hospital after a plane crashed in a garden in Anglesey in North Wales. For those watching on TV, you can see here, or just make out, it's not the easiest to spot, but there are 2 yellow panels that appear to be the plane that's stuck in the back garden, where witnesses say they saw a small plane nose diving, spinning mid-air before it disappeared out of sight. One witness who lives next door to that crash site said that he heard engines malfunctioning. Police say officers, the fire service and paramedics attended the scene following that crash. For the latest stories, sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thank you, Sam. Welcome to Mark Dolan Tonight. In my big opinion, the community jogging group Parkrun have been caught up in a trans row, with women runners no longer having their times published on the organisation's website. Well, I'm sorry, folks, you can't outrun biological reality. I'll be dealing with that madness in just a moment. In the big story, as his tax return reveals that he made over £2 million last year, is Rishi Sunak simply too rich to be Prime Minister? And should the UK taxpayer be funding the redevelopment of Manchester United's stadium, Old Trafford? I'll be asking TV News stalwart and Man United superfan Michael Crick. My Mark Meets guest helped overturn the wrongful conviction of Stephen Downing, who spent 27 years in prison for the murder of Wendy Sewell, a crime he did not commit. And in my take at 10, Prince Harry spends just half an hour with his father, who we know is very poorly, and no meeting with his brother. He might be rich and famous. Of course, the books and TV shows have made him millions, but the young prince has paid the ultimate price. Meanwhile, Prince William brings in extra help as he stands in for the King, and the feud between Prince Harry and Piers Morgan escalates. We'll get reaction from the Queen of US showbiz, royal and political reporting, Kinsey Schofield, live from the United States. We've got tomorrow's front pages at 10:30, with 3 top pundits tonight who haven't been told what to say and who don't follow the script. Tonight, broadcasting legend David Hamilton, former government advisor Claire Pearsall, and TV personality Precious Muir. As it's revealed, British bosses are now completely reliant on foreign labour. Has Britain once again become the lazy man of Europe? I'll be asking a top entrepreneur and former star of BBC One's The Apprentice. Plus, the most important part of the show, your emails. They come straight to my laptop, mark@gbnews.com. This show has a strict golden rule. We don't do boring, not on my watch. I just won't have it, especially on a Saturday night. This is Mark Dolan Tonight, your perfect Saturday night in. Let's have a bit of debate, let's have some fun, and let's get cracking. It's time for my big opinion. Well, this story will have you huffing and puffing. The popular community jogging group Parkrun sees large groups of people gather in parks and open spaces across the country every weekend, hoping to improve on their times on a weekly basis and eventually get past that retired accountant in Lycra that always seems to finish ahead of them. It's not exactly the Olympics, and I doubt there's much doping going on, but you are competing against yourself to get better every time, and the more ambitious participants are mindful about their placing and who they beat when they cross the finish line. However, Parkrun appears to be on shaky ground with a bizarre decision to scrap all records of people's timings after a row over transgender athletes taking female records. Parkrun has removed all gender, course and age records from its websites after a backlash when it was reported that at least 3 Parkrun female records were held by transgender women. And let me tell you, it's not a bunch of illiberal, transphobic cranks who are concerned about this move. Tennis legend Martina Navratilova, swimming champion Sharon Davis and Olympian Daley Thompson have all said that Parkrun should continue to collect data based on biological sex. So if it says that a certain woman is fastest in her category, then she is the fastest woman, rather than an intact biological male rocking the full meat and 2 veg, but identifying as female being above her in the leaderboard. How can that be fair? This is an ideological war on gender, with a strange movement which has come out of nowhere that likes to tell people they were born in the wrong body or that their biological sex is somehow fluid, subjective, and a matter of personal opinion. And it's women who come off worse. We've seen a double rapist accommodated in a Scottish women's prison, biological males winning beauty contests, smashing women in female sport, and scooping prized Woman of the Year awards. Women have lost their own lavatories, their own changing rooms, and decades of hard-won sex-based rights have been sacrificed at the altar of political correctness and a medical fiction. Now, I'm passionate that you should be able to identify however you like and be loved and respected for that. I've got trans friends who have been on that important and joyous journey. Good luck to them. But with men seeking equal social and legal status as women, this whole movement is shaping up like a men's rights campaign. If you think about it, it's history repeating itself. It's men pushing women around all over again. It's misogyny with lipstick. It's sexism in a dress. It's patriarchy in heels. This after the gay dating website Grindr told one user this week that they could not filter potential partners based upon their actual biological sex. So what does that mean? Well, it means that lesbians going on that website cannot select other lesbians. With the mantra that trans women are women, lesbians could now very easily go on a date with someone that's got a male member that's calling themselves a lesbian. We all enjoy a bit of a surprise on a date, but I think on that one, you're getting more than you bargained for. Trans ideology is so mad, it actually says to lesbians that if they don't sexually accept a biological male that identifies as female, they are a bigot. This is unfair, it's mad, and of course, it's homophobic. And I'm no expert on the lesbians, but from my observations, they are not in the penis business. Meanwhile, the conversion therapy bill passing through the House of Lords could potentially criminalise parents, teachers or organisations who discourage children from having puberty blockers or irreversible surgery on their reproductive organs. The world has truly gone mad. And now women can't even have a run around their local park and take pride in their progress. Men are women and women are men, are they? Well, this has echoes of the writer George Orwell and that famous line from his dystopian novel 1984. In it, he wrote, "The party told you to reject the evidence of your eyes and ears. It was their final, most essential command." Our beloved NHS have stopped calling women mothers. There's jargon like chest feeding rather than breastfeeding, or people with a cervix and cis women. Give me strength. We have to call out this madness and push back, otherwise women will be cancelled altogether. The organisers of Parkrun are on a slippery slope. They can jog on. Your reaction, Mark, at gbnews.com. We'll get to your emails shortly, but tonight's top pundits are broadcasting legend David Hamilton, former government advisor Claire Pearsall, and TV personality Precious Muir. Claire, let me start with you. Your reaction to the news that women that do the Parkrun won't have their listings on the website because we have to accommodate people who identify with another gender.
Well, it's absolutely ridiculous. I mean, this isn't the Olympics and people are competing against themselves and they want to know how they're doing, have they increased their times, are they getting a better placing? And it's about sport and fairness. And I think it's predominantly unfair if you put into a category somebody who is a biological male who will have an advantage. Let's all be honest. Men and women are very, very different when it comes to muscle and bone structure. So I think it's largely now only caught the attention of Parkrun, and all of the furore concerning this is because men's results have also been wiped from the website. I think that because men are now affected, this issue is coming up and is coming to the fore. So Parkrun should put it back as it was. If trans people want to run, that's absolutely fine. Nobody has a problem with that. Why not have a separate category and then you can please everyone?
However, I guess what Parkrun are trying to do, Precious Muir, is adapt to an ever-changing world and to make sure that if someone identifies by a different gender, that's respected and they can participate. All they're trying to do is be inclusive.
Right. I agree that they should be inclusive, but they shouldn't also it's a dangerous situation to actually remove that because the rights for women are being taken away. Being acknowledged as a woman seems to be like the worst thing ever at this point in time because it's like you should be ashamed to say that you're actually born a woman. It's like you should never say that you have a vagina. Like, it's like big things to say in this kind of world that we're living in right now. And for me, having transgender women in certain categories doesn't make sense. Like, you know, there is no way that a woman should be actually competing against a transgender woman because obviously they have advantages and it's not fair. So why are you removing the fact that you can specify a woman actually racing and saying what her results are, saying that she's actually a woman? I mean, I don't see the reason for removing that information at all. I think it's absolutely ridiculous.
David Hamilton, I just wonder whether history is repeating itself and this is men dominating women all over again, but in a different way.
Yeah, it sounds a bit like it, doesn't it, Mark? I think I agree with both the ladies, actually. I think that what you should have is a men's section, a women's section and a transgender section. Yeah. You certainly shouldn't have people who were born male competing against females. That's definitely not right. But it's interesting, the CEO of this particular company has said that Parkrun is not a race. He says many people are scared of finishing last. That's his reason for, you know, getting rid of all the stats from the past. I mean, I think that's just bollocks, isn't it, really?
Oh. Not pulling his punches. Claire, listen briefly if you can. Do you accept that argument that it's not a race?
Well, it might not be a race in that respect, but everybody's results are there, and it shouldn't be about who's coming last, who's coming first. It should be about making your times better and competing against yourself and becoming fit. That was the whole point of Parkrun when it was set up, was to encourage people into sport. And if you're going to now put them off of it, then it defeats its whole purpose. OK, well, let me be fair to Parkrun and say that I think what they're doing with this decision, even though I think it's the wrong decision, I think they're trying to make sure that their event is for everyone. But what do you think? Mark at gbnews.com. Aren't my pundits fantastic tonight? They're coming in hot and they return very shortly. But next up in the big story, as his tax return reveals that he made over £2 million last year, is Rishi Sunak simply too rich to be Prime Minister? And should the UK taxpayer be funding the redevelopment of Manchester United Stadium Old Trafford? I'll be asking TV News stalwart and Man United superfan Michael Crick next.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall? Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. Weekdays from midday.
Francis, Just Stop Oil have in the past broken the law. I remember distinctly the Dartford crossing. That ended up with 2 jailed, I believe, if I remember correctly. Is it ever justified in your view?
Yeah, thanks so much for having me on. I mean, I would have to say yes. I mean, we're trying to preserve my life, your lives, the lives of your family, and it's not just the planet that we're trying to protect, it's the lives of millions of people. And, you know, we know from history that we have to break the law in order to put pressure on the government and to be listened to.
No one would doubt your sincerity in your views. You genuinely believe in what you fight for. But there are others who think differently. For example, there are Islamist extremists who believe that people will go to hell unless they convert to Islam. They will sincerely, perhaps, break the law in order to force people to convert. In their view, they might be saving people's lives for eternity. There might be abortion activists who say that babies are being murdered and to save their lives we need to break the law to stop people having abortions. Why do you get to say that your moral conviction is the one that's right and other people's individual moral conviction are those that are wrong?
So what's really integral to the Just Stop Oil campaign is the fact that it is a non-violent campaign. That's what separates us from the examples that you've just given. We're absolutely dedicated non-violence, both as a tactic and as a principle. So though we might be breaking the law...
If individuals take it upon themselves to break the law for whatever their course is, surely the way that we decide what society wants in general is democratic and within the law.
Well, of course, we know also that protest is absolutely integral to maintaining and upholding a democracy, and in particular, non-violent protest. I mean, I really can't express to you how severe this situation is, and I'm sure you know this.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So, send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Well, a big reaction to my big opinion. The organisation Parkrun, who put on these runs every weekend across the country, have got rid of all records and timings in order to include trans participants. It means that women can't see where they are in the league table. A lot of you not happy about this. How about Elizabeth, who says, Mark, let the trans compete in the men's section and see how they fare. Gary says, boycott these events. Women need to rise up, please. Where are all the feminists? Stop this idiocy. If you have enough grains of rice, you will eventually fill a bag. It is the slow decline of society. And Rob says, hi, Mark, good evening. In my opinion, you'll see a great many transgender arguments in the run-up to the election. The activists will pick on any discussion. The ultimate aim is to make people reluctant to even question the biological truth. This will play into the hands of Labour, who are reluctant to stand up for the women and are frightened to explain what a woman is. Well, Bob, I'm not afraid to do that, as you well know. My mother is a woman. I'm married to one as well. And I've got 2 fabulous women on my panel tonight who, let's be honest, are putting me and Diddy David Hamilton in the shade. Lots more to come, but first, the big story. The drinks are on Rishi Sunak, as it's revealed the Prime Minister earned more than £2.2 million last year, paying an effective tax rate of 23%. This according to official accounts released yesterday. Downing Street published the Prime Minister's tax return, which showed that in total he paid just over £500,000 in UK taxes in 2022-23. His overall bill was kept low by the fact that 1.8 million of his earnings was put through as capital gains, meaning it was taxed at a lower 20% rate. The decision to publish his tax return is entirely his and goes back to his commitment that he made during the Tory leadership election. So what do you think? Is it encouraging? Is it a good thing to have a successful self-made man in number 10? Or is Rishi Sunak simply too rich to be Prime Minister? Could his remarkable wealth play badly with voters and cost him the next election? Well, let's speak to a man who is himself independently wealthy, television news stalwart, Michael Crick. Michael, great to have you on the show. Is Rishi Sunak too rich to be PM?
Thank you.
No, I don't think one should exclude rich people from being Prime Minister. I don't think he's doing very well as Prime Minister, but I don't think that's because he's rich. I think it's because he lacks common sense, as indeed a lot of very clever people do. They're very good at passing exams and getting into Oxford and doing well at Winchester, but they sort of lack the common touch. And I think Sunak certainly does. I mean, Michael Heseltine, for example, is also very rich. And I think he would have made an excellent Prime Minister. You probably disagree because of his politics. But I don't think that, just being rich excludes you. I think the problem with Sunak is that he's out of touch with the general public. I mean, he's got a big house in London, another big house in North Yorkshire in his constituency. He's just, I think, installed a swimming pool there. It's a very wealthy constituency, Richmond in North Yorkshire. He travels everywhere by helicopter. He doesn't actually meet many ordinary people, and I don't think he's met many ordinary people, certainly not in his adult life. When he was younger and worked in his mother's chemist shop, he would have met a lot of ordinary people. But I think the other day, that bet at £1,000 with Piers Morgan, well, that was stupid. I mean, he was basically, how many ordinary people could afford to make a bet for £1,000? 20 quid maybe, but £1,000, it added to this image.
Michael, as a former top lawyer living in a big house in North London, Keir Starmer is not exactly man of the people. He's also a knight of the realm, and most MPs are what could be described as privileged, aren't they?
No, I don't think that's actually true. I think many MPs in both parties now, I mean, a lot of the people who were elected for the Conservatives way back in 2019 under Boris Johnson came from lower middle class, some working class backgrounds. So, OK, yeah, there are wealthy people in Parliament, and you'd expect that because wealthy people have done well in life. They tend to, and they're clever and so on. But there are a lot of, very down to earth people who've been teachers, and Angela Rayner was worked in healthcare and so on, so in social care. So I don't think Parliament is, a very wealthy club, and I don't really think that's a huge problem.
Much has been made, Michael, of how much tax he's paid compared to others, but he's paying a lower effective rate because of capital gains. He's paying less, but within the rules, just like Saint Gary Lineker. What's the problem?
Well, there are a lot of people who have managed to avoid paying their tax. I mean, it is a bit off that he has only paid 23% tax when that is, pretty much the tax rate that somebody who is, at the lower levels of the 40% tax rate. So there will be people who have earned, 5% of that amount, or maybe somewhere at 80, 90,000 who will have only paid 23%. And of course, one of the problems he's got here is that his party professes to be a low tax party, professes to want to bring down tax, has brought down the rate of capital gains tax. And there will always be the suspicion that while he was Chancellor and now as Prime Minister, he's done that or wants to do that in order to help himself and to help his extraordinary fortune, which is, 800 million or something he and his wife are reckoned to be collectively worth. So from a political point of view, it does present a problem. But actually, in terms of his ability to be Prime Minister overall, I think you shouldn't exclude rich people from politics. In the same way you shouldn't exclude poor people either. We need all sorts to go into politics. I just think one of Sunak's problems, and we saw it this week in the House of Commons, of course, is he lacks common sense, and he keeps making gaffes that give away that sort of lack of emotional intelligence. Really, he may have ordinary traditional intelligence, but when it comes to emotional intelligence, to a sense of what the public are thinking, he's not quite there.
But I tend to agree with you. I don't think that the British people are so small-minded that they would judge somebody on the size of their bank balance. It's actually what impact that potential Prime Minister will have on their bank balance and the cost of living crisis. Now, Michael, let's talk about the cost of living in Manchester, because you're a lifelong Manchester United supporter. You wrote a cracking biography of Sir Alex Ferguson, and incoming Man United investor Sir Jim Ratcliffe wants to turn Old Trafford into the Wembley of the North and may consider applying for government funding to help with the cost of construction. So should the UK taxpayer pay for a new Manchester United stadium?
No, it would be absolutely outrageous. I mean, I want the United Stadium to be renovated. It's, you know, it's shabby, it's falling down, it's dirty. The sign that says the Sir Bobby Charlton Sand has faded from red to pink. And I thought that was incredibly disrespectful that they didn't even paint it at the time of Sir Bobby's death. But I mean, United are one of the richest clubs in the world. Sir Jim Ratcliffe is reckoned to be worth £20 billion. The idea that the government should be paying to renovate Old Trafford is bonkers. I mean, if the government is going to put money into Manchester, and there are parts of Manchester that need money, I mean, only 2 or 3 miles from Old Trafford are some really poor parts of Salford, for instance, and you see also lots of deprivation in the outer Manchester boroughs like Wigan and Oldham and Rochdale. But the way to level up the north is not to invest money into Manchester United. I mean, you know, my fellow fans will be annoyed with me when I go to the game at Villa tomorrow. But I think well, some of them will pretend to be annoyed. I think they'll all recognise that it's just balmy that to expect the government to pay for the renovation of United's ground. I mean, if money's going to go into football, it should be grassroots football, and it should be a proper fund to deal with the scandal of all the footballers, former footballers, who are dying of dementia because of all the heading they used to do when they were professionals.
That's a very, very important point that you've made. Listen, if you want to see a wonderful brand new spanking stadium, I'll take you down to White Hart Lane. You'll be mightily impressed if you haven't already been there. Michael, what do you think about the principle, though, of a Wembley of the North? And could that be Old Trafford reimagined and completely rebuilt?
Well, it was. I mean, United's ground was regarded as the Wembley of the North about 25 years ago, when it was, you know, all renovated and so on. And indeed, the ground, when it was built in 1910, was regarded as the best stadium in the world. So I'm all in favour of, United being the biggest stadium and holding a lot of international games and European finals and so on, which we've done in the past. But the football authorities, both in England and in Europe, have decided the ground is so dilapidated now, or has gone down. It's not a disgrace, but it's nothing like White Hart Lane, which is an amazing ground. I've had a tour of White Hart Lane and seen behind the scenes, and I've been there several times as a fan. And that would be the model for us. But of course, it's going to be expensive. But then, Jim Ratcliffe, proper fan, and he's got the money.
Too right. Listen, Michael, I think you're in Cumbria, so enjoy the Lake District. Don't fall in.
Thank you.
My thanks to Michael Crick, television news stalwart, and of course a regular pundit here on Mark Dolan tonight. Well, coming up, as it's revealed, British bosses are now completely reliant on foreign labour. Has Britain once again become the lazy man of Europe? I'll be asking a top entrepreneur and former star of the BBC show The Apprentice. Plus, in an exclusive Mark Dolan Tonight People's Poll, we've been asking, as his tax return reveals that he made over £2 million, is Rishi Sunak too rich to be Prime Minister? The results are in. I shall reveal all next.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Lee Anderson's Real World, Fridays from 7 p.m.
Dr. Jane Jones, who's the clinical lead for Care After Combat. Yep. Jane, thanks for coming. And just tell me a little bit about your organisation. What do you do?
OK, well, thank you for having me here so we can talk about Care After Combat. So we are an organisation, a charity, who work into the prison system, working with military veterans who've somehow got involved with the justice system and...
So there's quite a high population of ex-servicemen and women in our prisons. Why is that, do you think?
So 2014, the government did a review of who was resident in UK prisons, and what they found were that military veterans are the highest occupational group, and this obviously raises some concerns. Yeah. So the government wanted to do something about that, and so they supported Care After Combat initially just as a scoping exercise, really, to see if there was any way we could help these men and women actually, you know, understand the problems that led to offending behaviour and go on to lead successful lives.
So what sort of offending behaviour are we talking typically for people that's in prison that's actually served in our armed forces?
Primarily, it's violence.
Yeah.
So that is the highest offence that we work with.
Okay.
But of course, the military, as with everybody else, it's the full range of offending behaviour.
OK, so we're in a pub, Jane, Dr Jane, and I guess for some people, you know, the old tip of alcohol is good, a bit of fun of a weekend, relax, let your hair down. But for some people, alcohol is not always their best friend, and I guess that plays a part in some of your veterans that end up inside.
Absolutely. So, speaking from my own experience, a good 2/3 of the people I work with have some kind of mental health problem or mental health difficulty, struggling to either adapt into civilian life or with some of the traumas they've experienced during service. People might self-medicate with alcohol to manage some of those thoughts and feelings.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
Have a great Saturday night with me, Leo Curse, on the Saturday Night Showdown. It's a crazy world out there, so come and make fun of it with me, my panel of comedians, and a couple of people who actually know what they're talking about. The Saturday Night Showdown is your front row ticket to the clown show every Saturday, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. In just 25 minutes' time, I'll be dealing with Prince Harry, who spent just half an hour with his father this week. But first, we've been asking, as his tax return reveals that he made over £2 million last year, is Rishi Sunak simply too rich to be Prime Minister? Well, the results are in. And let me tell you that 46.1% say that, yes, he's too rich, and 53.9% say, no, it's absolutely fine. And that was my thought as well. I knew that you, my wise viewers and listeners, would not be so small-minded as to judge somebody by their bank balance. Speaking of which, UK companies are now looking to foreign workers because managers have found it difficult to attract British staff. The economist Max Mosley told the Telegraph newspaper that international workers are now propping up the labour market. More than 9 million people of working age have quit the jobs market, and the number of companies registering to become sponsors to hire staff overseas has doubled in the last 2 years. Meanwhile, the Office for National Statistics report that 2.8 million people blame long-term sickness as the reason they're neither in work nor looking for a job. And the Times newspaper report that the Home Office is facing unprecedented demand for work visas before the rise in the minimum salary threshold in April. 169,000 work visas were issued last year. Now, obviously, it's great to bring in the best foreign talent, but is Britain once again becoming the lazy man of Europe? Let's speak to top entrepreneur and former Apprentice star Ryan Mark Parsons. Ryan, good to see you again. Yeah. As a very successful businessman, are you aware of this issue in your own industry?
Well, yes, I'm just finding there's a growing sense of apathy in this country where people are just so willing to not work. And I think a lot of that is because of so many factors. For example, I'm a young person, I'm 23. Just talking to my friends, a lot of them are now living at home. The average house price in London is £730,000. They're looking at figures like that. They're looking at inflation, which is spiraling. Jeremy Hunt hasn't unfrozen the tax thresholds, which usually changes in line with inflation. There's so many financial issues that people in this country are now facing. It just encourages this apathy. And now we're looking at 5 million people in this country as well that are claiming out of work benefits. That needs to be slashed to incentivize people to actually get off their backside and go to work. That's what I would say. So I'm not surprised that employers are looking outside of the UK, because quite frankly, a lot of people in this country as well are too snobby to do the jobs that migrants are willing to do when they come here.
And Ryan Mark, if people have genuine medical issues, my heart goes out to them. I'm sure you'll take the same view. But is it really possible that 2.8 million people are so ill they can't work?
Yeah, I'm very doubtful of that figure in terms of like actual genuine medical issues, in terms of it being nearly 3 million. And also considering since the pandemic, the number of economically inactive people in this country is about 884,000, which is just ridiculous. And I think also the pandemic might actually be a cause for people getting so used to working from home. They get so used to these personal settings that they get to experience day to day because their employer is so relaxed about them not going to the office. I think this has inspired a mentality where people are just so comfortable with their surroundings that they don't even feel the need to go to work or go to the office, and they're just going to claim benefits because that is at an all-time high. I think so much needs to be done by the government to incentivize people to get out of bed, go to work, and it doesn't matter what it is. Why are 5 million people in this country claiming out-of-work benefits? 9 million people that could be working as well, that aren't. It's a joke.
Most definitely. Well, full disclosure, I don't want to be accused of double standards. As I was preparing today's show, I was working from home, and let me tell you that my team missed me terribly. Maria, Mescana, Katie, they weren't right without me. But let's bring in my top pundits. Broadcasting legend David Hamilton, former government advisor Claire Pearsall, and TV personality Precious Muir. David, do you think that Britain is once again the lazy man of Europe?
Well, I think a lot of people have probably worked out that they're better off on benefits than they are working, and they don't particularly want to work. I think the other thing is as well that sometimes people from overseas are prepared to work for less money. So I think it's a kind of catch-22 situation.
Yeah. Yes, I mean, Claire, how do we fix this problem? Because if that many Indigenous Brits aren't working, at some point the economy is going to fall over.
Well, I think the government needs to look very hard at tax bans because they've been frozen since 2022. Normally they go up with inflation. So it just means that at the moment you've got this horrible thing called fiscal drag, which has included so many more people into general taxation as a whole, but also those into higher rates of income tax than they've ever had to pay previously. And if you are on a relatively limited budget with everything going on with the cost of living crisis and the soaring rates of childcare, for example, then I think the government needs to really look quite hard as to what it's doing to re-look at the tax bans, perhaps move them in line with inflation once more, and make childcare much more affordable for those working families.
Although the flip side is that with a mental health tsunami and 8 million people on an NHS waiting list, Precious Muir, perhaps we need to understand that Brits just aren't as well as they were and they need support and they can't work.
Well, I think a lot of people haven't bounced back since the pandemic. I think that they haven't adjusted and realised that they need to get back out there and do the things that they need to do to get work, to be able to participate to society, to actually just like contribute. I think that they've become very complacent. They've become very like, OK, this is just going to how it's going to be. And they're not willing to do those kind of jobs for the pay that they're offering at the moment. And Europeans who are coming in will. I mean, most of the people in the service industry are from Europe. I don't see really that many British people working in, you know, restaurants, bars,
Costa,
hotels.
I've never had
like they really don't, and they're not willing to take on those jobs, so they have to offer them to someone. Somebody has to do it. So
somebody's got to do it. Ryan Mark Parsons, you get the last word.
Well, I really have to echo what Precious was saying. I agree. I think there's a growing complacency. And I think it's embedded in British culture where a lot of people just don't feel like they want to do the jobs that migrants are willing to do and at a lower cost. I've got friends that are Indigenous Brits. And when I suggested to one of them who's been unemployed for months, I said, why don't you get a job in a restaurant? Why don't you go to a cafe? Why don't you do this? No, it's beneath me. It's beneath me. And I think this snobbery, this apathy, this complacency, that's what needs to change. And I think until that does, we're going to see these rates soar and unemployment is going to keep growing.
Ryan Mark Parsons, you're a star. Please come back and see us soon. Top entrepreneur and former star of the BBC One TV show, The Apprentice. Coming up in my Take at 10 in just 15 minutes' time, Prince Harry spends half an hour with his rather unwell father and no meeting with his brother. I'll be dealing with the prodigal prince in no uncertain terms at 10 o'clock. But first, my Mark Meets guest helped overturn the wrongful conviction of Stephen Downing, who spent 27 years in prison for the murder of Wendy Sewell, a crime he did not commit. Campaigning journalist Don Hale also helped free Barry George, who was wrongly accused of killing TV's Jill Dando. He tells his incredible story next.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this?
Are you rethinking this policy?
Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News Breakfast. Every day from 6 a.m.
Claire, you want to talk by cars growing by a couple of centimetres a year?
Yeah, well, 1 centimetre every 2 years.
Okay.
It's unrelenting because the people are so fixated on the big SUVs. The sales have gone through the roof, and yet it's James Nix, the analyst for Transport and Environment Campaign, said the author of the report on the trend said, spurred on by sales of the largest SUVs, vehicles are getting wider every year. Now, what does that mean for us? Well, it means that our roads weren't...
Comfortable ride, beautiful engines, smooth. I mean, it's luxury, it's gorgeous.
Well, as I know, I used to have two, but I don't...
You used to have two SUVs?
Well, one SUV at a time, but I had two brands of them. But I'd no longer drive in London now because I just don't see the point, because of the ULEZ, because of the, you know, you could run down a thing and get fined.
Parking spaces, whatever.
The growth in car size also causes issues for their drivers. The report found that largely luxury SUVs, which are about 2 metres wide, no longer fit in off-street parking.
That's true.
They also leave too little space for passengers to get in and out of the vehicles in typical off-street spaces, and they're about 2.4 metres wide, the report found. And I'll tell you, I was stuck in a bus last night trying to get home, and the buses couldn't move because the streets were too crammed with all of these massive cars either side.
Chelsea tractors.
And it was gridlocked.
Yeah, but maybe they're not the problem, maybe the buses are the problem.
The buses take people to their place of work and get
I'd
them
like
home.
to know when, because when I go through London, all I see is empty buses.
Oh, you're lucky. Every time I'm on one, they're full.
Well, they're obviously only full at rush hour. You see, the thing is, property developers, when they do high-rise car parks or, you know, they build a multiplex cinema and there's a car park attached to it, that's not my fault that I can't fit into their space. It's their fault. So
well, it's all driven by money, isn't it? The more spaces that they have, the more people they can get.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So, send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Half an hour with his old man. I'll be dealing with Prince Harry in 10 minutes' time in my Take at 10. But first, Mark meets Harry. Take it away. Yes, it's time for Mark Meets, and this evening the award-winning author and journalist Don Hale, who has worked tirelessly to campaign against miscarriages of justice, like the case of Stephen Downing, who was wrongly convicted of the murder of Wendy Sewell. Downing spent 27 years in prison for a crime he did not commit. But Don Hale's fearless and relentless campaigning saw the conviction overturned and Downing walked free. Don Hale has also been heavily involved in the controversial case of Barry George, jailed for life for the murder of BBC TV star Jill Dando. His conviction was also ultimately quashed. Don Hale's work on the Stephen Downing case was adapted into a BBC TV drama starring Stephen Tompkinson, and his best-selling book about the case, Murder in the Graveyard, is out now. Don Hale, welcome to Mark Dolan tonight. When did you realise that this chap, Stephen Downing, may not have been guilty of murder?
Well, funny enough, it came probably within the first 6 months. It was a story. I've been at the Metal of Mercury about probably 9 years then, and I hadn't really heard much about the case. But one or two people were sort of saying to me, oh, he is innocent, he's serving time for somebody else. And sort of out of the blue, the family contacted me and said that they thought some new evidence had been sent to me as the editor. I'd just come back from holiday and started to look round, and nothing was there. But it sort of whet my appetite. So I went to meet the family at the home and saw that the tremendous amount of paperwork they had, and the fact that all the clothing from Stephen at the time of his arrest and everything was given back to them. And the strange thing was, I went to the police, because I've obviously worked with them quite closely before, to say, I think there could be new evidence here that could quash the conviction, or the case needs to be looked at. And they just went mental. They were so awkward, they were arrogant, they were hostile. They threatened me with all sorts of things if I ever got involved with it. And they said straight away, everything, all the evidence, everything was burnt, lost and destroyed. Even the pickaxe handle, wooden pickaxe handle, which was the murder weapon. And I couldn't believe this. I thought, well, if somebody is saying that they're innocent, they're still in jail after 27 years, there must be a chance of relooking the evidence here. And the strange thing was, I've got some very good contacts within the police. 3 or 4 of them contacted me straight away and said, the police are lying. We have the evidence. What do you want? And they offered me all sorts of things. And so I said, well, look, I just need to get an idea of what's what from the family, but I want as much as information and evidence as you can give me. And you mentioned about Parkrun before. I'm a runner myself. And I said to these other people, some were runners with me, I said, look, we'll have to set up something because you're going to be watched, I'm going to be watched. And so we set up drop zones behind stone walls here and there, or behind gates on my country runs. And so we set up a scene called footballs, because I used to play football, whatever, Aston Villa or Burnley or whatever. And so if I got a phone call from somebody or they left a message to say Burnley, I knew that there was some documents at a certain place. And so over a period of a couple of years, we built these up.
Yeah.
Well, obviously, the police were very adamant that I should reveal my sources. They said, we know who they are, but we want you to confirm. And I said, well, if you know who they are, you don't need me to confirm. So they threatened me with all sorts of things, 2 years in jail if I didn't reveal my sources. And it went on for a long time of these threats, intimidation. I was stopped for speeding when I wasn't speeding, I was pulled over, and all sorts of things. And I ran a story. The first story in the Matter at Mercury was I was trying to prove him guilty, actually, to see if he was guilty. And I ran it. Innocent or guilty was the headline. And the phones went absolutely ballistic. We got lots of people coming on saying, we went to the police 21 years ago then, offered them evidence. We saw a man running away like a bat out of hell. We saw other people that were involved giving false evidence. Police officers contributed with false statements. And I got a police officer who was in charge of investigation on this case about 3 years after the conviction, came to me and said, your man is innocent. And he was pinned against the wall by a superintendent and threatened.
Don, that is extraordinary. It's worth stressing, by the way, that you were honoured with an OBE for your amazing work. You've been heroic, and you were vilified and attacked and treated terribly badly. This man, Stephen Downing, came out of prison. I think he got £900,000 compensation, but of course that doesn't touch the sides in terms of the impact on his life. Although murder is not involved, many of your cases have parallels, don't they, with the post office scandal?
Yes. Well, yes, it's funny that the main guy from the post office one only lives about a mile from where I am. So everything's sort of come full circle with it. And I wish them all the best. But, I mean, that's been handled so badly. And again, you're up against the authority, the government, with cover-ups, failure to disclose, crucial evidence. It happens so many times, and this is where you need a good campaigner to stick with it. And, I mean, I don't think Alan or anybody in post office got death threats or anything like that. It made me, as I was looking into the Downing case, I was getting a lot of death threats about it from certain individuals and that. I had 2 hit-and-run attempts. I was chased by an HGV lorry. I had bomb threats. So I was saying, well, if Downing is the man that killed Wendy Sewell in 1973, why are these people making threats against me? And so it just made me more and more determined to try and get to the truth.
You were an extraordinary journalist, a very brave man as well, and you earned that honour from the Palace, and it's been an honour for us to have you on the show. The book is called Murder in the Graveyard, and Don, we've got to get you back because we could talk about this for hours. It's thanks to you that Barry George walked free as well. He is the man that did not kill Jill Dando, but served time for a crime he didn't commit. My thanks to Don Hale, OBE, a privilege and a thrill to have you on. Thank you, Don. We'll catch up soon. I wish we had longer. Coming up in the 10 o'clock hour, tomorrow's papers hot off the press and live reaction from my top pundits. And in my take at 10, Prince Harry spends just half an hour with his dad, who's not well, and no meeting with his brother. He might be rich after the books and TV shows, but the young prince, the prodigal prince, has paid the ultimate price. I'll be dealing with Harry in just a couple of minutes. You won't want to miss it. This is Mark Dolan Tonight.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, good evening. I'm Jonathan Vautry here with your GB News weather forecast provided by the Met Office. Have quite a foggy and murky night to come ahead of us leading into Sunday. Certainly could see some mist and fog patches forming relatively widely across areas of the UK. Quite a damp night as well, with showers pushing across the southwest. This band of longer rain moving into eastern England and eastern Scotland as well. Could be some localised disruption with this rainfall falling on already very saturated ground. Temperatures, though, underneath all that cloud generally holding up above freezing, but we can't rule out a patchy frost for some clearer spells across areas of Scotland. But it will be quite a damp start to Sunday, again with those showers pushing their way through. Could be quite heavy, maybe with some thunder along some coastal areas of the far south. Rain eventually clearing for eastern England, but it is going to be a very wet day for northeastern areas of Scotland. But some brighter spells developing as we head into the afternoon too, though, with some continuing showers moving in from the west. Temperatures generally around 7 to 11 degrees Celsius. On Monday, the area of low pressure that we have seen around this weekend will slowly drift its way northwards, a bit closer towards Iceland. That allows this northwesterly flow of air to start moving its way in. Quite a lot of isobars on the chart there, so it will be a relatively breezy day for most of us. Those showers will be most frequent in the north and west, particularly further parts of Northern Ireland, western Scotland, but areas further towards the east, starting off with a decent amount of sunshine, a bit of fair weather cloud bubbling up into the afternoon. Can't rule out the odd shower, but certainly drier here nonetheless. We hold on to a fairly changeable theme throughout next week, so further showers and longer spells of rain certainly on the cards for many. Bye-bye.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Patrick Christie's Tonight, weekdays from 9 p.m.
Ken, do you find the Union flag, the Union Jack, divisive?
In some situation, but as Simon quite clearly stated, and I agree with everything that he says in regards that there's situation when people use it for ulterior motive to cause fear, alarm and distress. We saw that with the far right when they came up to saying protecting the Churchill statues and things of that nature. But largely on the large whole, even I wave the St. George's flag on a sporting occasion. And I don't see anything wrong in raising the Union Jack or the St. George's flag so long as the intention is correct. And as he says, Mr. Brockhurst, he served for the country and he should have every right to be proud of what he's done and the way that he wants to display it.
All right, Simon, what do you make of this kind of, I would argue it as like student social media-based politics, where you get these pillocks from the Green Party, whatever, saying, oh, it's divisive, and I can't believe it. It will be legal in this country to do... Do those people need to get out more? I was on the streets of Stratford earlier on, an incredibly diverse place, speaking to a massive range of people right across different age demographics. I couldn't find a single sausage who said to me that they thought that this guy from the Green Party was right.
He obviously has absolutely no attention from anybody, and this is his way of finding attention. Both Ken and myself, we both agree that nobody should use any symbol of national identity to offend others deliberately, because that's just inflaming a situation. There's so much sensitivity around so many things today, and people do get offended by so much so quickly without any rhyme or reason.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Good evening, it's 10 o'clock on television, on radio and online in the United Kingdom and across the world. This is Mark Dolan Tonight. In my take at 10, Prince Harry spends just half an hour with his father, who is very poorly, and no meeting with his brother. He might be rich after the books and TV shows, but the young prince has paid the ultimate price. Staying on the royals, and Prince William brings in extra help as he stands in for the King, and the feud between Prince Harry and Piers Morgan escalates. We'll get reaction from the Queen of US showbiz, royal and political reporting, Kinsey Schofield. Plus, tomorrow's newspaper front pages and live reaction in the studio from tonight's top pundits. And we're really enjoying a bit of showbiz royalty tonight because we have broadcasting legend David Hamilton, political commentator and former government advisor Claire Pearsall, and TV personality Precious Muir. So a packed show, a busy hour. I'll be dealing with Prince Harry after the headlines and Sam Francis.
Mark, thank you very much, and good evening from the GB newsroom just after 10 o'clock. Leading the news today, GB News has learned that 15 migrants were apprehended after attempting to cross the Channel in a stolen French fishing boat. The small vessel left the French coast between Calais and Dunkirk in the early hours of the morning. The boat was intercepted and handed over to UK Border Force officials. The migrants were then brought to Dover. That means that so far this year, almost 1,400 migrants have made the journey across the English Channel in small boats. Police have been searching the River Thames today in central London, looking for the body of chemical attack suspect Abdul Azidi. Earlier, a police boat was seen moving between Vauxhall and Chelsea bridges, with the Metropolitan Police saying that they began their search just after low tide at around 9 a.m. this morning. The 35-year-old suspect was last seen on CCTV on Chelsea Bridge. For those watching on TV, you can see there the figure of Azidi on the left-hand side of your screen, just crossing that bridge. That was the last time he was seen, and that was just before 11:30 p.m. on the night of the attack in South London. Detectives say they now believe Azidi has died and that his body may never be found. A woman has today been charged with attempted murder after the suspected poisoning of two children, one aged 9 and one aged 13. Emergency services responded to the scene in East Sussex on Thursday evening after receiving welfare calls. All three were later taken to hospital for treatment. Appearing in court earlier, the 38-year-old woman was remanded in custody. She'll appear in court again on the 8th of March. Authorities say it's an isolated incident, and they have also said there is no risk to the public. Pro-Palestinian protesters in Birmingham have been removed from a Barclays bank on the High Street after staging a sit-in today. 7 people were seen lying down inside the bank's building, holding Palestinian flags and placards saying "Stop the Genocide." It's been reported that one man who was angered by the protest was seen banging on the glass doors of the bank's building. We understand, though, that no arrests were made. Meanwhile, Lord Cameron has today said that he is deeply concerned about a planned Israeli ground invasion of the southern Gaza city of Rafah. It follows an airstrike earlier that killed 3 people in a car. If you're watching on TV, you can see there the aftermath from that attack as cars lay on fire. The Palestinians are claiming that it was carried out by the Israeli military. Medics have also said that a separate strike by Israel overnight killed 17 others in the same area. The strike comes after Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu announced a plan to evacuate civilians from the crowded southern Gazan city, and he said to defeat the last Hamas fighters there. The US has, though, said that it won't be supporting any military action in Rafah without the guarantee of protection for civilians. Back here in the UK, the ban on pavement parking should be extended across England. That's according to local councils. Wheelchair users, the elderly and parents with pushchairs are among those put at risk by having to navigate around vehicles parked on curbs, according to the local government association. They're calling on ministers to recommit to the principle that footpaths are for walking. London is the only area in England currently where pavement parking is banned. The Prime Minister has vowed to reward hard work with tax cuts in an interview with The Times. Rishi Sunak's also hit back at critics who doubt that he'll be able to turn the Conservatives' fortunes around. He says he's up for the fight. He's hoping that the hint of tax cuts ahead of the next general election can help balance out his current deficit against the Labour Party in the latest polls. Sunak's new vow to slash taxes comes after his own tax summary was revealed on Friday. It showed that his UK tax bill was more than £500,000 last year, out of his total income rising to £2.2 million. The Royal Navy aircraft carrier HMS Prince of Wales is setting sail this weekend. The £3 billion vessel will take over leading the largest NATO exercise since the Cold War. The announcement comes a week after its sister ship, HMS Queen Elizabeth, was forced to cancel its deployment because of an issue with its propeller shaft. It's just 18 months after HMS Prince of Wales itself suffered a similar malfunction. For the latest stories, you can sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
My thanks to Sam, who returns in an hour's time. Welcome to Mark Dolan Tonight. Prince William brings in extra help as he stands in for the King, and the feud between Prince Harry and Piers Morgan escalates. We'll get reaction from the Queen of US showbiz, royal and political reporting, Kinsey Schofield, plus tomorrow's newspaper front pages and live reaction in the studio from tonight's top pundits. Broadcasting legend David Hamilton, former government advisor Claire Pearsall, and TV personality Precious Muir. Plus, they'll be nominating their headline heroes and back page zeros of the day. A packed hour, and those papers are coming, but first, my take at 10. Fair play to Prince Harry for dropping everything and flying over to see his poor old dad, King Charles, who has revealed a shock cancer diagnosis. The King was clearly enthusiastic about the visit, delaying his helicopter flight to Sandringham. Helicopter, eh? So much for net zero. But the meeting between Charles and Harry reportedly lasted little more than half an hour. That's about as long as an episode of Coronation Street. And this right royal soap opera shows no signs of a happy ending, even if this rover has returned. Now, if your old man had received this worrying health news, would you find 30 minutes long enough to express your love? I'd be bedded in for days, making cups of tea, fetching warm blankets, and reminding him ad nauseam what he means to me. But half an hour? Less time than it takes to cook a Sainsbury's Chicken Kiev ready meal in the oven. And that tells you everything you need to know about the state of their relationship. And let me tell you, whilst he's been through a lot earlier in his life, and my heart goes out to him for that, these days, Harry is no victim. It's his own family, his late grandmother, the Queen, Charles, Camilla, Catherine, and most worryingly his brother William, who have been the real victims of the Sussexes' smear campaign. And with Harry having led the attacks with money-spinning books, podcasts and TV shows, it was his job this week to build bridges with his family. Now, he has seen his dad, fair enough, but why no meeting with his brother William? If you travelled thousands of miles across the Atlantic, would you not do everything to see your only sibling, even if they've got the hump with you? I'd be banging on the front door, begging for mercy. And why hasn't Harry been to see his sister-in-law, Catherine, hospitalised for a clearly serious condition and now recuperating at home? Surely you'd be round there with a bunch of flowers, a card, a bag of grapes and a room-temperature bottle of Lucozade to give her some energy. Maybe some crosswords to keep her occupied, or a copy of the Daily Express, always a cracking read. If my sister-in-law had been poorly in hospital, wild horses couldn't keep me away. Harry's blink-and-you'll-miss-it meeting with his father was matched only by his blink-and-you'll-miss-it visit to the country. 26 hours in total he spent in the UK. As strong a message, if you needed it, that he can't stand the place. The contrast now between Harry and his brother William, who polling suggests is the most popular royal ahead of even his father, couldn't be more stark. At a charity event with Tom Cruise this week, it was William who looked like the big star, with Cruise, one of the most famous entertainers in the world, looking upon our future king with total admiration. Following his father's health woes, it won't be lost on William that at some point he's going to be king. And whilst we wish Charles a speedy recovery, it's likely that the gentle transfer of power begins from now, as William readies himself in the years ahead for the top job. Meanwhile, Prince Harry doesn't seem to have a job at all. And what was his rush to leave the country rather than perhaps enjoy a second visit with his old man? Well, he had to attend the NFL Honours Awards in Las Vegas, where he cracked a few jokes. What happens in Vegas stays in Vegas, unless you're Prince Harry, in which case we find out bloody everything. I'm really worried about the relationship between the royal brothers, Diana's beloved boys, and I wish they could come together again. But the Queen's funeral didn't bring them together. The unveiling of a bronze statue for their mother didn't bring them together. And now the diagnosis of a life-threatening illness for their father sees them miles apart, both geographically and emotionally. Now, Harry is not beyond forgiveness, and the door must remain open. But I'll be honest, I fear the damage is done, and that William and Harry may never reconcile. Harry's money-spinning World Privacies Tour and his 3-year-long Moan Fest may have been highly profitable, but in losing his own brother and precious time with his poorly father, the price he's paying is far higher. OK, folks, we have a developing story. This has just landed on X, formerly known as Twitter, and the palace have issued a statement. It's a personal letter from King Charles. Let me read it to you right now. He writes, "I'd like to express my most heartfelt thanks for the many messages of support and good wishes I've received in recent days." The King goes on, "As all of those who have been affected by cancer will know, such kind thoughts are the greatest comfort and encouragement. It's equally heartening," he writes, "to hear how sharing my own diagnosis has helped promote public understanding and shine a light on the work of all of those organisations which support cancer patients and their families across the UK and the wider world. My lifelong admiration for their tireless care and dedication is all the greater as a result of my own personal experience. Charles R." Isn't that wonderful? Well, that's just a letter from King Charles, which has dropped. It's on Twitter as we speak. Brilliant sentiment, and we do wish the King a speedy recovery. Let me get your reaction to my take at 10 and the fact that, yes, well done, Harry, for visiting his dad, but half an hour and he's back in America? Would you not still be at home looking after your old man? Let me know your thoughts, Mark, at gbnews.com. But let's hear from my top pundits, broadcasting legend David Hamilton, former government advisor Claire Pearsall, and television personality Precious Muir. David Hamilton, your reaction to Prince Harry's blink-and-you'll-miss-it appearance?
Well, it was very strange, wasn't it? Nobody knows quite how long he was here. It started with 45 minutes, then it went down to 30, and somebody says that it was 12. It certainly wasn't very long. What could his father say to him in that time? Thanks for all the lovely things you've been saying about us for the last couple of years, or don't worry about me, I'm fine. He certainly wasn't going to tell him what type of cancer that he had, because he knew that he might, blab it out to the world. So I hate to be cynical, but I feel that the trip was more for Harry than it was for his father.
Well, I guess he's damned if he does and damned if he doesn't, Precious Muir. We've complained that he hasn't come to the UK in the past. He pretty much dropped everything and flew to the UK. What's the problem?
I think Prince Harry can't do anything right. I think everyone's just going to always criticise him, no matter what he does. He came to see his dad. He obviously was here for the right reasons. He didn't bring Meghan because he didn't want to take the limelight or the spotlight away from what is happening with King Charles, and he did the right thing. I mean, at the end of the day, we don't even know if King Charles was able to see him longer than 30 minutes. So we have to understand that he is unwell, and he might have said to Prince Harry, you know what, I can only manage 30 minutes or 45 minutes or an hour right now, and I need to get back home and I need to rest. We just don't know the real story. So for us to keep going in on Prince Harry, it's not right and it's not the thing to do, because at the moment we're losing the message. The message is King Charles is unwell and he's not well, and we need to support that.
Claire Pearsall, Mark Dolan Tonight is the home of diverse opinion. Precious disagrees with what I've had to say. What's your view?
I mean, I do think Precious has a point with this, is that King Charles has had a diagnosis of cancer. None of us know what treatment he's under. We don't know what his health is like at the moment. He may well have been told, don't be surrounded by people for infection reasons. I think 100%. That Prince Harry, yes, he should have come over, and he did. And he made the journey, so I think he should be welcomed. If he hadn't, then we would have all been criticising him for that. So I think that it really is a family matter. None of us know what has been said to the King. None of us know what his treatment plan is. And none of us know what the conversation between Harry and the King actually was.
Claire, you're being much too circumspect. You've gone terribly woke on this. I mean, the bottom line is, if this was your old man, Claire Pearsall, and you lived in America, you'd be back in the UK, you'd be here for weeks on end. You wouldn't spend 26 hours in the country. I take the point that visits to the King might be time limited, but I'd still be in Britain, and it would be a struggle to get me home again.
Well, that's a matter for you and your family. I think that my father probably wouldn't want me hanging around. My level of sympathy isn't that great, and anyone who knows me knows that I'm not really good on that kind of stuff. And I would be there to offer some funny comments and, yeah, the bottle of Lucozade. But it's entirely up to that person if they wanted you around. And, yes, I probably would have stayed longer than 26 hours. But you also don't want to outstay your welcome if somebody is poorly.
Exactly.
So I think, you know, we really have to let that family deal with their rules under their circumstances.
I think when people behave badly, you tend to feel very doubtful about things that they do and they say. And these two have had such a track record, and really, to be honest, they've been made an absolute pig's ear of everything they've done since they left this country. So
I think they've done the right thing to leaving. I think it's right that they left because they had to take themselves away from the situation that wasn't really going anywhere. I mean, obviously, there was just things that needed to be said. They said it on Oprah's show, and now it's aired. Now they need to move past it. I mean, when it comes to sickness, I think everything goes from there. Like, you need to be by your family, support your family and by their side. And Harry was. I don't care about the time. He actually was there. He was present and he made the effort. And I think that's what we all need him to do. So that's, yeah.
Should Harry still be in Britain looking after his old man? Let me know your thoughts, Mark, at gbnews.com. Or are we being too hard on the prodigal prince? Let me know your thoughts. But next up, we're going to stay on the royals because Prince William brings in extra help as he stands in for the King. And the feud between Prince Harry and Piers Morgan escalates. We'll get reaction from the Queen of US showbiz, royal and political reporting, Kinsey Schofield. That's next.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall?
Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
Martin Daubney, weekdays from 3 p.m.
Welcome to the show. Superb stuff, great footage. So you're right in the thick of it there. What's the mood on the ground?
Well, I've left there now. I've actually now come to that EU Council summit that I was talking about. It's still pretty chaotic. The entire city of Brussels has been completely clogged with these tractors, sort of 3 abreast in most of the roads across the city. The people of Brussels aren't particularly happy. I mean, this is sort of reminiscent for some people of the Just Stop Oil protests, you know, people gluing themselves. People are unable to get to hospital appointments, and there's a lot of upset about the destruction that's happening on the streets of Brussels today. But on the other side, there's also the protests, which the farmers are saying that EU green laws simply are not able to fit with what they need to do to keep their businesses going. And just before the protests happened, we saw the European Commission actually make some concessions to the farmers' protests. And this is on the demands that were put on them to set aside somewhere in the region of 5% of their land for regrowing for biodiversity. A lot of the farmers have said that's not possible, and the European Commission has said that they can delay that coming in. So they have won a small concession with these protests.
And Jack, there's a feeling as well, a huge dissatisfaction that the European Union has managed to find 50 billion euros in aid to send to Ukraine, and yet farmers in particular are on the receiving end of net zero targets, taxation on diesel, and endless red tape. So many farmers, Jack, saying they're measuring ditches to see if they have to drain them or not. There are minimum requirements on the width of battery hen enclosures. Endless red tape, as Jeremy Clarkson pointed out in Clarkson's farm in Britain. They've simply had enough, and they're shouting, Ursula von der Leyen, we are here.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Let's have a look at this response on email to my take at 10. Prince Harry met his father for around half an hour. That's about the duration of an episode of Coronation Street. But this right royal drama won't have a happy ending, I fear. This from Sue. Mark, why are people wanting half-hour Harry and Prince William to reconcile and Harry and Meghan become part of the royal family again? That would be the worst thing to happen to the royal family, the UK and the Commonwealth. Harry cannot be trusted. He is a traitor, says Sue. How about this from Paul? Harry visit. Mark, maybe he asked the king for money. Well, I suspect it's just a matter of time, Paul. And Harry is a traitor, and next time he comes to this country, he should be locked up in the Tower, says Dave, who's not pulling his punches. There you go. Look, I love your emails. Do keep them coming. mark@gbnews.com. But it's time now for US News with the Queen of American showbiz, royal and political reporting, Kinsey Schofield. Hey, Kinsey.
Hi, Mark. Good to hear your voice. Good to see you.
Great to have you back on. Prince William, the Prince of Wales, gets help from a top diplomat, given that he's deputising for his father.
Yeah, new hires for the Wales crew. It's exciting. Prince William, he's appointed a former government diplomat as his private secretary. Ian Patrick also worked for former Liberal Democrat leader Lord Paddy Ashdown. But other than that, I know very little about him, so I'm excited to learn more about Mr. Ian Patrick, Mark.
Well, definitely. I mean, what we know is that William's got a lot on his plate at the moment, Kinsey. His wife is recovering from a serious abdominal procedure in hospital. His father is recovering and receiving treatment for cancer. And, of course, you know, he's got 3 children as well with his lovely wife. How do you think he's going to get the balance between caring for his wife and pretty much being deputy king?
I think he's going to nail it. I think that he would push back on that, that description. We know that King Charles is very engaged. He's on Twitter today, so he's on X today. So we do know that the king is very still much engaged, seeing those beautiful red boxes on a regular basis, having meetings with Rishi Sunak whenever he can, even if it's just over Zoom or digitally. But the king wants us to know that he's still very very much around. I think that he's just been advised to, and perhaps it's because the treatment he's seeking, well, it can sometimes make you vulnerable to other, sometimes even a common cold. So perhaps he's been told not to engage with a lot of strangers because his immune system might be a little bit weakened by what's going on, but the king still very much there. Prince William, a lot of new pressure on his shoulders, but I think he's going to nail it. As a young child, this was a baby that had an understanding of what was to come. You listen to Paul Burrell, our friend, or Ken Worf, also our friend, talk about when he was little, just how worried he was about becoming king one day. He's had plenty of time to mentally prepare for this. And I look forward to seeing much more of him because he was born for this role. He was made for this job.
Meanwhile, Queen Camilla had to dash to see Charles. Tell me more.
Well, no, this is actually, first of all, I wanted to say I pitched 2 stories to you today. One was Taylor Swift, going through a bunch of different time zones to get to Travis Kelce. Oh, sorry. But to get to Travis Kelce at the Super Bowl. But then, and we've got Camilla, too. I've never thought I'd see Camilla and Taylor Swift in the same category. But this is an excellent example of Queen Camilla's discipline and dedication to not just the crown, but her husband, who is recently diagnosed with cancer, as we know. Due to poor weather conditions on Thursday, Queen Camilla's helicopter was grounded. And instead of canceling an appearance she had at a charity concert, Mark, she opted to get in a car and drive 6 hours from Sandringham. So because she wanted to be there. She wanted to make sure that everybody that was expecting her would see her. So she drives out there, and then it was like breaking news at the time because she was so sweet and engaging with everyone, talked about how the king was doing well, but also said how much he really appreciated all the positive feedback and kindness he's received, which again, we just heard today over Twitter, that it really must be touching his heart so deeply that people are writing him and reaching out to him about this cancer diagnosis.
Well, definitely, in that story about Queen Camilla shows what a devoted wife she is and what a no-nonsense queen she's turning out to be. I'm a big fan, I've got to say. Good news for Prince Harry this week. He has settled with the Mirror Group over phone hacking allegations, but his war with Piers Morgan intensifies.
I mean, will it ever end? Yeah, that's right. The publishers are expecting to pay Prince Harry's legal fees plus £300 in damages. So I do expect that to be a pretty big lump sum. The settlement is related to claims of unlawful intrusion on 115 stories. And this was a 4-year battle between the prince and publisher. These stories were as old as 1996. I met NSYNC in 1988, if that gives you any idea, between 1996 and 2010. And Harry's attorney, once everything was settled, spoke to the media, and he accused Piers Morgan of knowing everything that was going on with his reporters behind the scenes. And then Piers, in classic Piers form, comes out and says, I totally agree with Prince Harry that ruthless intrusion into private lives of the royal family for not financial gain is utterly reprehensible, and I hope he stops doing it.
Brilliant stuff. Meanwhile, Taylor Swift sweeps the board at the Grammys. Enjoy the Super Bowl, Kinsey, and we'll catch up next week.
Thank you, sir. Talk to you soon.
The fabulous Kinsey Schofield. Check out her brilliant podcast, To Die For Daily. Next up, tomorrow's papers. See you in 2.
I'm Christopher Hope.
And I'm Gloria DiPiero, bringing you
PMQ's Live here on GB News. Every Wednesday, we'll bring you live coverage of Prime Minister's questions when Rishi Sunak and Sir Keir Starmer go head-to-head in the House of Commons.
We'll be asking our viewers and listeners to submit the questions that they would like to put to the Prime Minister, and we'll put that to our panel of top politicians in our Westminster studio.
That's PMQ's Live here on GB News, Britain's election channel.
Farage, Monday to Thursday from 7 p.m.
Lots of people have different ideas, but principally a conservative approach to getting growth is to reduce taxes so that people, ordinary people and businesses can spend more of their own money to invest and grow the economy.
So the theory is that you cut taxes and that then pumps more money into the economy.
Exactly right.
Growth.
And then people, it's not government that are creating wealth. It's individuals, businessmen, companies that create wealth. It's the private sector that creates wealth, that the public sector then taxes and spends.
I get the theory, but one of the criticisms of you,
sure,
and I think one of the criticisms actually of all political parties, is they appear to be incapable of cutting government spending.
That's the key. I mean, and I think when I look back, is that we should have had a credible plan to reduce the increase in spending. Now, that's often a difficult concept to explain,
but it's in line with inflation, etc.
That's all right. So when you're slowing the increase, it means 1 year you spend £100, and the next year you spend maybe £101, as opposed to going up to £110. So the actual level isn't going down, but you're slowing the increase, and that's very much what I tried to do. And actually, looking back, the one thing I wish I'd done, was to present a credible spending plan at the same time as the tax cuts that we announced.
You had a go, it didn't work out for whatever reason, and that analysis will go on for some years to come. We have Jeremy Hunt there as Chancellor now, hinting quite strongly now there won't be any tax cuts, but the truth of it is, under 14 years of Conservatives, for a variety of reasons, the tax burden has risen.
That's right.
To the highest since the Attlee government, way back in
80 years,
1951,
years,
whatever
right.
it is.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall?
Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
It's 10:30 and time for tomorrow's front pages. And we start with that story that's a developing story. I've just been able to read out a letter from the King shared on social media, such as the nature of the monarchy in the 21st century. Well, the Sunday Mirror have got the story. First words since cancer. My heartfelt thanks to you, says the King. His message of gratitude for the outpouring of public support. Sunday Express, your messages have given me the greatest comfort, says the King. The Observer. We've given up the fight, say Tories, as poll defeats loom. Conservative MPs tonight predicted fresh attacks on Rishi Sunak's leadership within days as they accuse their own party of surrendering to Labour without a proper fight in two formerly safe Tory seats where by-elections will be held this coming week. Also, teachers axed as schools in debt hits record. Mail on Sunday now. Vanessa Feltz, I'm single but certainly not celibate, so I've heard. Also, after Mail on Sunday discovers accounts of Charles's diagnosis already for sale online, and royal aides brand them inaccurate and intrusive, Palace calls in lawyers over bogus AI books on the King's cancer. Also, Charles to the nation, your kind thoughts are the greatest comfort. The Independent, dozens killed in Israeli strikes on Rafah, ahead of Netanyahu's planned evacuation and invasion. John Rentoul writes, Keir Starmer's government could become very unpopular very quickly, and criminals using courts' chaos to escape justice. Sun on Sunday, King's brave words, your kind thoughts are a great comfort. And actress and rocker break up. Actress Billie Piper has split from her rocker partner Johnny Lloyd after 8 years.
Oh, wow.
Thoughts and prayers for all involved.
Ruined my weekend, I can tell you.
I'll tell you something. That guy calls himself a rocker. What's his name? His name is Johnny Lloyd. Well, he's no Diddy David Hamilton, let me tell you that for nothing. Who, I can assure you, is
probably very pleased about that.
He probably is. You're very happily married, but I wouldn't leave you alone with Billie Piper. The Daily Star Sunday, Aliens exclusive. Abby, I saw 3 UFOs on the A3.
Sure.
Model and wag Abby Clancy was left terrified after a close encounter with 3 UFOs whilst driving on the A3, which I've got to say is one of my favourite A roads. It's up there with the A1.
It's the one that's got all the roadworks.
Yeah. That's why I like it.
Explains it.
Peter Crouch's wife said they tracked her car, then vanished at high speed. She added, "I'm not even joking. This is so true." Well, that's me convinced. Brilliant stuff. Listen, let's get reaction to all the big stories of the day and tomorrow's front pages from my top pundits, broadcasting legend David Hamilton, former government advisor Claire Pearsall, and TV personality Precious Muir. And Claire, how about that story in The Observer? We've given up the fight, say Tories, as poll defeat looms. Poll defeats loom. What do we think? Have the Tories lost the fight now? I mean, look at Rishi Sunak, the body language, the tone in his voice. Have they given up?
It feels a bit like it when it comes to these by-elections, because normally when there's a by-election, MPs get told they have to make 3 visits, they have to put stuff out on social media, activists have to go there a certain amount of times, and we've had none of that. It has been really, really quiet, and normally social media is flooded with pictures and ministers going around saying how great it is to be somewhere. We've not seen that. It almost feels like this has now been priced in, that these by-elections have been lost and the party has to look at a general election coming. So that's pretty much how it feels in Westminster right now.
And they don't want it to look like they fought for the seat and then lost it.
Absolutely. So you have to look at which is your best outcome, the least worst outcome. And if you say, well, we knew we were going to lose it, so therefore we were pretty hands-off, you can hope it'll go away.
Rishi Sunak had a hard week. First of all, mocked in the Commons by Keir Starmer for getting into sort of transgenderism, whilst at the same time the mother of a young woman murdered by 2 people. Of course, the young woman was a trans woman herself. So the issue is that for Starmer, of course, it's 28 billion U-turn on the Green Revolution. Who's had a worse week, Starmer or Sunak?
No, I think we have to come out as an evens. It's a score draw on this one because nobody has had a good week. The Prime Minister started off badly with this particular bet with Piers Morgan. It then went downhill on Wednesday with the comments in the chamber. Now, it's not a trans row. It's about how good you are at politics. And if it's written in your notes, but you know full well that this is going to be problematic, then you have to put a red pen through it and move on and don't say it. So I think that his naivety in politics is showing through. I mean, Starmer and the U-turn, who saw that one coming? Yeah. Everybody. Yeah. They knew full well that they were going to have to borrow this money. They've allowed the Conservative Party to take the lead on this. Yeah. And now they've just handed it to the Tory Party by saying, oh, yeah, actually, we can't do it. We're going to have some ambitions in the green agenda, but we can't spend that much money. So, you know what, at the end of the week, they've both come out badly, and I think the country is going to suffer as a result.
What are your latest thoughts on the potential date of a general election? There's a bit more talk of May than there was a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah, I've said May for some time, and you can see it all lining up, particularly with the Rwanda bill. Yeah. You know full well that it's going to go to the Lords, it's going to get monkeyed around, it's going to come back in a version that isn't going to be acceptable to parts of the Conservative Party. So you would therefore go to the country and say, I've tried, those unelected lords at the other end have thwarted me. Do you want to have a who governs election? And I think that is one of those issues. I also think with the economy not doing particularly as well as expected, those tax cuts are going to be fewer and far between, and we were promised those. So I think that it's all leading up to a May election, and also you don't want Keir Starmer's Labour Party to look like they're going to recover in any way, shape or form and become stronger. So you can look at them and say, he really doesn't have a plan, which is what we've been saying all along, and here's the proof. He's just U-turned on one of his flagship policies.
And if you wait till November, you look like a hostage to fortune. You look like you're clinging on for power. If he goes to the country, Sunak, in May, he can say, I believe in my vision for the country, which is why I'm going to go early.
Yeah, absolutely. You look like you've got a plan. You look like you're in control of it, whereas if you leave it until November, then the tables can turn very quickly and it's the opposition that will take control, and you never want to be in that position.
What do you think about that, David, the idea of a snap stop the boats election?
Yeah, I think, you know, it's actually difficult to remember a government that's collapsed quite in the spectacular style that this one has. I think the only chance for them now is to have a sort of fire sale, where what they do is they, I think, you know, a la Gordon Brown in the past, they just, reduce all the taxes so that when Labour come in, they've got an absolutely impossible situation to inherit. And I think that's the only hope for them now, really, quite frankly.
So you think a scorched earth policy where essentially they splash the cash before Starmer gets in.
Splash the cash, give all the money away, and then when Labour come in, the first thing they've got to do is increase income tax, which makes them immediately unpopular. But I'm old enough to remember a Labour government, you know, from the past, and I just hope people, you know what they're voting for. I mean, the chances are that people like you who live in a nice mansion, you'll get a nice mansion tax.
That's exactly right.
Failing
just
that,
built another conservatory today.
Failing that, you'll get a land tax. You know, you have to pay on your acres of land that you've got. So, you know, be prepared. That's all I can say.
Indeed. What do you think about the date of the next election, Precious? When do you think Britain should have an election? For my viewers and listeners, when's the right time?
I think as soon as possible. I think Rishi Sunak is completely out of touch and he's losing the votes for the younger generation. He will not get the votes for the younger generation. So it is looking like it will be Labour in the next election. That's what I believe.
And is that good news? Do they deserve a crack at power, do you think?
I don't think either one is ready to be able to take on what we need right now for the country. And so either one is not going to help.
How about this for a bombshell? This in tomorrow's Telegraph. Boris Johnson, Rishi Sunak has to call me first if he wants election help. Do you think that if he doesn't perhaps come back into front-line politics in the cabinet, perhaps, that he should be campaigning for the Tories? And might that help them in a few months' time?
Boris Johnson? No, I don't think so. I think he needs to just stay where he is. I don't think he can help the campaign. He will just kind of ruin it completely. Nobody has any sort of hope or respect for him now. So they've lost that respect for Boris Johnson. He doesn't have the people to vote for him. He's not going to help Rishi whatsoever. Best to stay where he is.
Claire Pearsall, Michael Lind writing in tomorrow's Telegraph. Joe Biden's condition is simply a matter of record. Let the facts speak for themselves. Do you think that concerns around Joe Biden's cognition have reached a tipping point?
I think the clippings that we've seen this week certainly pull that into context. It's a man who is quite clearly unwell, and I think it's quite unfair that he is allowed to continue in that position. You know, that's an absolute no-brainer for me, that if you are suffering as badly as he is, you need to stand down, you need your family around you, and you need advisors who are going to say, this isn't working. I think it is fundamentally unfair on the man to let him continue.
Why doesn't his wife tell him? Why doesn't his wife say to him,
that's a really good point.
The game's up, you know?
Yeah, and I think you should, because otherwise he's just putting himself out there on the world stage to be ridiculed, and that I don't think is in anybody's interests. I think that it's a bad enough state in America as it is, but to be pointing the finger and laughing at somebody that has potentially got quite a serious illness, really, really not great.
I think it's time.
Could this do lasting damage, Precious Muir, to the reputation of the Democratic Party, who have stood behind this man as leader? Letters to the editor of The Telegraph. One of them reads, "It's time for the Democrats to face facts about Joe Biden's fitness to lead America."
Yeah, I agree. I think he needs to step down. He really is not in a good position to run the country, and the country is a very big influence around the world. So for Joe Biden to still be president, it's time for Kamala Harris to step in and take over. She is ready mentally and physically to run the country.
Is, however, Joe Biden, David Hamilton, the victim of ageism?
Well, I've said that on GB News before, because he's actually about 4 years younger than me, I think.
Right.
Oh, wow.
So, you know, when the word doddery comes out, you know, I know I'm diddy, but I hope I'm not doddery.
Definitely not.
But I think some people are just unlucky, and it is a very serious illness. And unfortunately, you know, the brain dies before they do. And that's really, I think, is what's happened here.
We're watching it as it happens, live. You know,
yes, we are in real time.
There have been some incredible clips that we've seen this week, and actually they're really quite embarrassing, aren't they? Really,
they really are.
Putin must be laughing, mustn't he?
Of course he is.
And you think that, you know, this is the great world leader, and the man that he's
just incapable, and his wife has to get on stage and walk him off to remind him that it's time to go.
You had journalists in the audience trying to explain what the question was because he'd forgotten halfway through.
Do you think, before we move on, do you think the US media are complicit in this man still being president, given the fact that so much of American media is liberal?
I
feels to me like a conspiracy of silence.
No, I don't think so. I think this actually is a matter for the family and the people surrounding him.
But do you not think journalists... But do you not think they just pretend, you know, there's nothing to see here regarding Joe Biden's cognition?
If
it was Donald Trump making these gaffes, they'd be all over him, wouldn't they?
If anything, I think the press want to keep him there because actually that is selling more stories. And they would do the same with Donald Trump.
I agree.
OK. How about this devastating headline, Precious Muir, in The Times? Michael Gove, if the young can't get housing, they will abandon democracy.
Well, what do you mean? I mean, I think at the end of the day, housing is going to be, well, has been or is really expensive. You can't get a mortgage now. You can't buy a home. And rent is extremely high. I mean, now you can't get like an apartment, one-bedroom apartment for like less than £1,700. Yeah. A decent one in a decent neighbourhood. So, yeah, I mean, the younger generation just can't manage to live outside of the family unit. They have to maybe live at home or with like a roommate situation. It's just impossible. It's physically and, like, it's just not...
Well, yeah, and Claire, Michael Gove is framing this as a threat to our democracy, because if young people don't feel invested in the economy or in the country, well, they'll abandon it.
And he's not wrong. And I think that we've seen that. I think a lot of young people will go abroad for different jobs and they will see that there is no hope in their own country. It's as stark as that we don't invest in our young people. We want them to be able to stay in this country. We want them to take on jobs. We want them to learn. We want them to have a property and a family. But if we're not going to enable them to do so, then I think that we're in a really, really tricky position. And Precious is right. Rentals are just shocking at the moment, trying to get a mortgage. But also, we haven't built enough houses. And I know that we've been saying this over and over again. We need to be able to build. If you don't build the houses, you can't sell them to families, you can't sell them to young people. We don't have enough.
And briefly, David...
I think we are in a situation where it is almost impossible for young people to get onto the property ladder.
It's extremely
and I think that's a very, very unhealthy...
I mean, is the elephant in the room, briefly, before we hit the break, that with legal net migration of 700,000 a year, now, that might be fantastic for the economy, we can debate the level, but that's more pressure on housing, isn't it? I mean, we can't keep up with demand as it is without 700k every year adding to the population.
We say we're not building enough houses, but today I was in Kent and there was an estate there. It was a former airfield and this airfield is gone, and you can't believe the number of houses that there are. They're actually building houses, when you think about it, just about everywhere. You know,
yeah, but the younger generation can't afford it. They just simply can't afford it.
Yeah.
There you go.
You're building houses for people that they can't afford.
There you go. Fascinating debate. Lots more to come. And in an exclusive Mark Dolan Tonight People's Poll, we've been asking, as they make the case for a Wembley of the North, should Manchester United get taxpayer money for the redevelopment of Old Trafford? The results are in. I shall reveal all next.
I'm Christopher Hope.
And I'm Gloria Di Piero, bringing you
PMQ's Live here on GB News. Every Wednesday, we'll bring you live coverage of Prime Minister's questions when Rishi Sunak and Sir Keir Starmer go head-to-head in the House of Commons.
We'll be asking our viewers and listeners to submit the questions that they would like to put to the Prime Minister, and we'll put that to our panel of top politicians in our Westminster studio.
That's PMQ's Live here on GB News, Britain's election channel.
Farage, Monday to Thursday from 7 p.m.
Lots of people have different ideas, but principally a conservative approach to getting growth is to reduce taxes so that people, ordinary people and businesses can spend more of their own money to invest and grow the economy.
So the theory is that you cut taxes and that then pumps more money into the economy.
Exactly right. And then people, you know, it's not government that are creating wealth. It's individuals, businessmen, companies that create wealth. It's the private sector that creates wealth, that the public sector then taxes and spends.
I get the theory, but one of the criticisms of you,
sure,
and I think one of the criticisms actually of all political parties, is they appear to be incapable of cutting government spending.
That's the key. I mean, and I think when I look back, is that we should have had a credible plan to reduce the increase in spending. Now, that's often a difficult concept to explained.
But it's in line with inflation, etc.
That's all right. So when you're slowing the increase, it means, you know, one year you spend £100 and the next year you spend maybe £101 as opposed to going up to £110. So the actual level isn't going down, but you're slowing the increase. And that's very much what I tried to do. And actually, looking back, the one thing I wish I'd done, was to present a credible spending plan at the same time as the tax cuts that we announced.
You had a go, it didn't work out for whatever reason, and that analysis will go on for some years to come. We have Jeremy Hunt there as Chancellor now, hinting quite strongly now there won't be any tax cuts, but the truth of it is, under 14 years of Conservatives, for a variety of reasons, the tax burden has risen.
That's right.
To the highest since the Attlee government, way back in
80 years,
1951, whatever it is.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall?
Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
Now, earlier on, in an exclusive Mark Dolan Tonight People's poll, we asked, as they make the case for a Wembley of the North, should Manchester United get taxpayer money for the redevelopment of Old Trafford? Well, 90.7% say no, they shouldn't, whilst 9.3%, probably a few Reds voting in that one, say that yes, they should. OK, a couple more papers for you, a couple of front pages, and we start with the Sunday Times. You got a brief preview earlier. New evidence puts pressure on police over teen who plunged from balcony. Michael Gove warns that democracy is in danger if young can't get houses. And the King, I take comfort from your best wishes. Sunday Telegraph, Army eases security checks in drive for diversity. And King takes great comfort from support from the nation. Also, migrants dupe church leaders to avoid deportation, say judges. Brilliant stuff. Back to me, and welcome to Broken Britain. Before we get to my pundits' nominations for their headline heroes and back page zeros of the day, the King's been on Twitter, at least his people. We've heard from the Palace, and he has thanked the public for their outpouring of support in the aftermath of his diagnosis of cancer. Well, my top pundit, David Hamilton, you received a diagnosis for cancer some years ago.
2 years ago, I was told that I had a form of blood cancer. And basically, I've got too many red blood cells. I'm too red-blooded.
I always thought it.
Well, I knew that already, but it's no laughing matter. And when you hear that word, I went to St Luke's Hospital, which is a cancer hospital in Guildford, and I went there just thinking, I've got too many red blood cells, until they told me I had this condition, polycythemia vera.
Yeah.
And
who I thought was an ex-girlfriend of yours.
Well, it's a funny name, but it's not a funny thing to have.
No.
So basically what they do is they take a pint of blood from you once a week, and then since then I've been on chemotherapy. But the moment that you hear it, it doesn't matter how many other people have got it. When you know it's you, you suddenly think, God, you know, the game potentially here, the game is up. So that is an awful shock when you hear that you've got cancer.
And how are you feeling? And are the medics happy with your progress?
Well, I'm not having the venesection anymore, thank God, because you can't get blood out of a stone. So that was always, my wife would tell you that. But I'm now on chemotherapy, and the only thing with it is you do get a bit tired.
Yeah.
But you know, I'm sort of coping okay with it.
Well, you are a bona fide national treasure, and we wish you well in your
Thank you.
in your battle against the disease. You look fantastic, and you're making some great points tonight. So there you go.
Oh, thank you. Well,
there you go.
Doing my best.
Keep it going, David. And actually, whilst I've got you, could I ask for your nomination for headline hero of the day?
Well, my headline hero is Prince Charles, and I think when he told us that he had cancer, I think that was a very brave thing to do. I think we needed to know that, and I think that it gave a lot of courage to other people. Anything that makes people aware of cancer and treatments and what they can do, I think can only be a good thing. So Charlie is my darling this week.
Wonderful. Well, Bonnie Prince Charlie indeed. Claire, your hero of the day, or heroes?
UK farmers. They have been out in Dover protesting at Dover Docks yesterday. We've seen it coming across Europe at the moment where they're out there protesting, and we absolutely need our farming industry to be supported. Without farmers, we don't have food. It's as simple as that, and we need to support them. We need to understand what it is they need, and the government really does need to look at the subsidies it supplies.
And Precious, you're backing the King as well today.
Yes, I am, yes. I think that it's a wonderful thing that Prince Harry was able to see his father going through such a terrible time and to be supportive. So, yeah, I really am for King Charles, yeah.
David, your back page 0.
It's always easier, isn't it, to find a zero than a hero?
Yes.
My zero this week is the Wildlife and Countryside Link, who are the people who are claiming that the countryside is dominated by white people, governed by white British culture values, and is a white space. Well, I live in the countryside, and I can assure them that it's a green space, and it's not a white space, and that everybody is welcome. So I'm afraid it's more Rolex.
Oh, there you go. Precious, do you think the countryside is racist?
I mean, I don't think so. My father has a country house in Oxfordshire, so we're basically there in the middle of nowhere, so we don't really see anyone. But I don't think it is. It embraces everyone who can afford to live there. That's what it is, you know.
OK, listen, clocks against us, Claire. Liz Truss, your back page 0, why?
Well, for the popcons of this week, the new splinter group from the Conservative Party, and trying not to take the blame for what she did in her 49 days.
And Precious, who's your 0 tonight?
Rishi Sunak. I think that bet was absolutely obnoxious, and he is so out of touch with the people, and him doing that just shows us who he truly is.
Well, listen, you are truly a brilliant set of pundits. Really enjoyed your company tonight. Precious, Claire and David, they will return soon. And I'll be back tomorrow at 9 o'clock with John Sargent, Anne Widdecombe, and TV personality and SAS hero Rusty Firmin. Well done to my brilliant team for working so hard. We've had Harry, we've had Maria, we've had Mescana and Katie, and let me tell you, it's not just thrown together, this show. Loved your emails, loved your company. See you tomorrow at 9. Headliners is next.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, good evening. I'm Jonathan Vautry here with your GB News weather forecast provided by the Met Office. Have quite a foggy and murky night to come ahead of us leading into Sunday. Certainly could see some mist and fog patches forming relatively widely across areas of the UK. Quite a damp night as well, with showers pushing across the southwest. This band of longer rain moving into eastern England and eastern Scotland as well. Could be some localised disruption with this rainfall falling on already very saturated ground. Temperatures though underneath all that cloud generally holding up above freezing, but we can't rule out a patchy frost for some clearer spells across areas of Scotland. But it will be quite a damp start to Sunday again, with those showers pushing their way through. Could be quite heavy, maybe with some thunder along some coastal areas of the far south. Rain eventually clearing for eastern England, but it is going to be a very wet day for northeastern areas of Scotland. But some brighter spells developing as we head into the afternoon too, though, with some continuing showers moving in from the west. Temperatures generally around 7 to 11 degrees Celsius. On Monday, the area of low pressure that we have seen around this weekend will slowly drift its way northwards, a bit closer towards Iceland. That allows this northwesterly flow of air to start moving its way in. Quite a lot of isobars on the chart there, so it will be a relatively breezy day for most of us. Those showers will be most frequent in the north and west, particularly further parts of Northern Ireland, western Scotland, but areas further towards the east, starting off with a decent amount of sunshine, a bit of fair weather cloud bubbling up into the afternoon. Can't rule out the odd shower, but certainly drier here nonetheless. We hold on to a fairly changeable theme throughout next week, so further showers and longer spells of rain certainly on the cards for many. Bye-bye.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
The Camilla Tominey Show. Sunday mornings from 9:30.
I appreciate the story isn't in today's papers, but it has been running all week, and it's
Yes.
this row over the use of nitrogen hypoxia to kill this man who was on death row in Alabama.
Alabama, yeah.
And it's been linked back to you, and I wanted to ask you about it because this is intriguing, because you did a television show back in 2015 where you, I believe, tested this method of execution. Just tell me briefly about it, Michael. What happened?
I didn't test this method of execution, and it was a bit longer ago than that. But what I did do was test hypoxia. So I tested various ways in which people are killed in the United States, and asked the question as to whether there was a more humane way of doing it. So I was put into hypoxic situations, for example, into a chamber run by the Netherlands Air Force, which simulated what happens if you're in an aircraft at 30,000 feet and suddenly the windows blow out. And what happened to me was that I was almost instantly rendered incapable. As an experiment, I was trying to play with children's toys, putting triangle shapes into triangle spaces, and I was quickly unable to do that. I was asked, what is 9 minus 5? And I said 5. And then the officer who was with me, the Air Force officer who was wearing an oxygen mask, said to me, Michael, put your mask on or you will die. And I was incapable of putting my own mask on. Now, this suggested that hypoxia was very fast acting.
Yeah.
And that you had, obviously I was in no pain or anything like that. I was just completely unaware.